This is another study by the AICPA subsidiary CPA.com, and they found that 92% of CPAs actually self-admitted that they were not future ready. And future ready is, as they would say, the capacity to be anticipatory of emerging technology, trends in business, demographics, and the social environment that impact your organization or industry. The three words in red are the key there, right? Aware, predictive, and adaptive. Do you see the trend at all? Do you understand it? Are you actually aware of it? Can you predict what the trend will do if it continues to your business or to your career or to your industry? And then the last one is, can I actually adapt? So this idea of being future ready is really the point of what we want to talk about in this session. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the industry. So first of all, this is research from the AICPA based on KPMG's CEO study. I mean, these are numbers you see all the time, right? But 4 in 10 CEOs are transforming their companies into significantly different entities in the next 3 years. Most of these global CEOs said the next 3 years are more critical than the past 50 years in their businesses. 62% are using disruptive technologies to improve their products and services, and 65% will pursue growth through partnerships and alliances. You're even seeing a trend now where companies who are fierce competitors are now starting to partner and work. I just heard an area the other day where Oracle is now partnering with IBM Watson to help use artificial intelligence on top of all the Oracle ERP and data systems. So that sets up this idea that we actually are living in, what's the Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times. I would say this is the other way of saying that. We actually live in VUCA times. Now VUCA sounds like my old Italian grandmom. VUCA came out of the Army War College in Pennsylvania to describe the crazy environment that the military was facing when terrorism started to ramp up, actually in the 90s, even before 9/11. And they said it's becoming unpredictable. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so now what's happened is about 2008, during the Great Recession, the Institute for the Future, a guy named Bob Johansen, he actually applied the term VUCA to businesses. And in fact, he described it, this is the new normal after the recession. Remember that? The recession of 2008. After every recession, we always ask, when will things get back to normal? And did they ever get back to normal? Actually not. We called it the recession of 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. You pick the date. And even today, that while we have a better economy, it's not predictable. It's certainly not more stable from that perspective. And then there's the idea of what's going to happen to the public accounting side of our profession, right? Will the audit still be relevant in an age of artificial intelligence and blockchain and cognitive computing? And I think the answer is yes, if we figure this out, right? So this is AICPA's work talking about the idea that the audit will in fact transform, probably even sooner than 10 years. But technology, data analytics, standards baked in, as well as new skills. Accounting Today had a piece that said how AI will turn auditors into analysts. And that's the big idea, right? Is that if you see this technology coming, what can you do to start adding the skills that will differentiate you in a world of more and more automation, even at that level of service? And this isn't just math, this is literally decision making, if you will. Now, this is another data point from the CPA.com group of the AICPA. And they did an innovation survey, and they found that most of the CPAs surveyed did not see any competitive threats from specific challengers or outside challengers. Now, what's interesting is we all know the stories about Uber and Airbnb and obviously now Watson, but did the taxi industry start Uber? Did anyone from the industry? No. Did the hotel industry start Airbnb? No. So most disruptive threats actually tend to come from the outside. And I think you can see that across the board. Obviously, these are technology plays. So what would Watson mean to us, right? We've seen the latest press where IBM Watson has teamed up with KPMG doing the audit, doing 100% sampling of the transactions in a fraction, not even a fraction, like one minuscule piece of time. And then you've seen the latest with H&R Block and Watson teaming up to do taxes. So this artificial technology that only a couple years ago was kind of Star Wars type stuff is now right in our backyard at the tax preparation end of our profession and at the top of the audit side. And I suspect it's going to be playing near a theater near us any minute now. And that ties into this other kind of big idea that came from an Oxford University study where they studied the automation risk of the professions and employment. And accounting, unfortunately, tax was ranked as second most likely to be disrupted. I think accountants and auditors were fourth. Number one was retail sales. And certainly you can see that. But 98.7% chance of being automated for a tax preparation, and then 93.5% for audit and accounting. That's in 20 years. The report's a couple years old, so you probably have about 17 years now. That's pretty mind-blowing, actually. And what does that mean? Well, does that mean we're going to go away? We're going to lose all of our jobs in accounting? No. But it does mean significant chunks of what we do will be different and will go away. So we like to say, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And that's kind of how we see this lesson, is how can you learn how to deal with this technology and other trends and begin to be pre-active, if you will. I don't think that's a word, but it should be. So now we want to talk a little bit about the idea of anticipating. Actually, how do I get ahead of these trends? And we like to say it's a new mindset, and a new mindset will give you new results. But it does require you shifting your thinking. We're not going to tell you what to think, but we are going to tell you how you can think differently and begin to shift your mindset and others in your organization. And it starts out with this idea of anticipatory mindset, which we would say is, how do I anticipate disruptions before they disrupt, problems before we have them, and opportunities before your competition? That's what we're hoping. This all comes from the work of Dan Burris and the Burris Research Group. And he likes to differentiate agility from anticipation, and I think there's a significant point here. He says agility is great for unpredictable change. We can react after the change occurs. We can solve problems quickly after they occur. And it gives us an advantage over slower competitors. And do you think that we're ever going to not have to be agile and react to things? No, I think all of us would say no matter how much you can anticipate, there will always be things that come up that you just did not think about or could not control. But the difference when you start thinking about anticipatory thinking is that's the strategy for turning change into opportunity, for identifying and reacting to change before it occurs, identifying and solving problems before they occur, and jumping ahead of your competition, actually with lower risk. And that's when you base it on this idea of hard trends. So we're going to say, start with certainty. And when we say that, it's like, what can you be sure about or certain about? And that is an idea that Dan Burris in this anticipatory organization mindset says it's about identifying hard trends from soft trends. Hard trends being future facts, things that you know will happen. And so if you know they're going to happen and they're future facts, you can base your strategy on them, lower risk, higher probability of success. And then, as he likes to say, you can leave out all the parts about the future that you're uncertain about. Just focus on the things that you actually can know. There's also soft trends, which are trends that you might identify that aren't measurable and predictable, but you can actually have some research, even though it might change. Say housing starts. Housing starts, you can go, over the last 3 years, we've seen this kind of growth. Does that mean next year, well, you could predict on that and work and just monitor that. Now, that could flip. That's the difference between a soft trend and a hard trend. A hard trend is going to keep going at the rate it's going. So let's look at technology. The exponential growth curve we keep seeing, that's a fact and will continue. So that's kind of how we think about those differently. Now, the number one hard trend, if you will, or the number one trend about the future, is that in an age of automation, relationships are probably going to count even more than they do now. So what can we be doing to do the things that machines can't do, which is the human part of what we do? And so I think that's a good news for certainly accounting and finance professionals who are often looked at as the most trusted professionals in their organizations. So that trust and the relationship combined with new skills and insight will actually allow you to continue to move while automation happens below us. So now I'm going to give you what we call the 3 hard trends or future facts so that you can start to begin to think about. So the idea is when you're looking at any trend, the first question you ask is it a hard trend or a soft trend? If it's a hard trend, then I kind of put it in a bucket, and then I can start saying where would be an opportunity around that hard trend. The corollary is what's a predictable problem if I ignore that hard trend? So I know Dan Burris likes to say, if it can be done, it will be done, and if you don't do it, someone else will. And so I think the point would be, if you don't do it and someone else does, what will happen to your organization? What will be the predictable problems that you might encounter? So let's talk about the 3 categories. So number 1 is government regulation. And obviously, many in accounting and finance, we all know that. Everything from taxes to standards and rules. But think about all the other compliance things in your businesses. Workplace rules, right, for the workforce. Environmental rules from your state, local, county, and national government, right? Multiple regulations that if you're a global company that have to do with all the different things that you do from a trade standpoint. So all those would be examples of the hard trend of government regulation. And even in an anti-regulation administration like we have, this will still continue to grow. So second is technology, and obviously that gets to this idea of the exponential curve. It's empowered by 3 digital accelerators, right? Storage is doubling every year, bandwidth is doubling, and so is processing power. And together those 3 are like combining and converging and amplifying that whole change process. And the last one is demographics, right? We know how many people are in the workforce. So those 3 hard trends are what you should be filtering all these trends through as you start thinking about the future or seeing what's happening in your industry or paying attention to where some of this disruption might be coming from. Okay, now I'm going to test you. When we did the CPA Horizons project, looking out at the profession by 2025, we identified all of the trends, the top trends that CPA said, these are the trends that we think are most impactful. So I'm going to ask you to identify which ones of these are hard or soft. Now the general rule with a soft trend is if you have to discuss it or argue about it with someone, then it's probably a soft trend. Only hard trends are kind of fixed in terms of you know what it's doing and it's not going to change. So let's talk about the first one, changing demographics, aging workforce, diversity. Is that hard trend or soft trend? Hard trend. It's going to happen. We know how many people, we know how many 40-year-olds there are right now. If you look at the population, you've got baby boomers over here, Gen X in the middle, and then Gen Y or millennials here, and then you've got Gen Z starting to come into the workforce. The point is there's a shortage of Gen X. That's not likely to change, right? You're not going to add new 40-year-olds to the workforce. Increased globalization, economic shifts, and increasing competition. Hard trend or soft trend? Actually, soft. Because look at Brexit, look at what kind of some of this anti or nationalism that's going on. That could actually slow down globalization, even though it feels like a hard trend because it's being fueled by technology and connectedness around the world. Number 3, technology revolution, cloud, social, big data, XBRL, yep, hard trend. Issues around information security, privacy, and data integrity, cyber security, hard trend. Shift to consumer and employee power, this whole idea of push to pull, the notion that employees the United incident where they put all that stuff on social media. Actually, it's soft because it could change. It's not guaranteed that it will keep moving, but it's also not likely. That would still classify as a soft trend. Change in the way we communicate, Skype, mobile, all the things that are going on there, text, hard trend. Work-life challenges or conflict, doing more with less, 24/7 work patterns. Actually, it feels like a hard trend, but it's a soft trend because it can change. We could adopt ways, work-life balance, methods, tools, technology that might help manage that from that perspective. Number 8, information overload. We put filter failure. The fact is, that's the same idea, right? That could change. It feels like a hard trend. It's impacting us. But there are people and technology that could adapt to fix it. Number 9, increasing complexity of rules and standards. That's a hard trend. And then number 10, economic uncertainty. That's a soft trend. The government could fix it if we could get them to do that. So hopefully you got a little bit of a primer on hard trends and soft trends to get you comfortable with that so that you can begin to become your own futurist in terms of identifying these trends so that you become the disruptor, not the disrupted. I'm going to cover each one of these categories quickly. Again, demographics, 5 generations in the workplace. We know that who they are. There's the graphs on them. So right now, millennials, number 1 generation in the workplace. There's your blue is Gen X. You can see how much that starts to go down. And then baby boomers, 10,000 a day are retiring. So when you start thinking about like a hard trend like this, it makes you go, okay, if I know there's a hard trend in terms of how many people are in the workforce, and I need manager talent really bad. So what do? Do you just keep fighting for it? That could be one solution. But what if you said, I'm going to build my own by fast tracking a high potential millennial and getting them up the curve fast and moving that into my ranks? So that's one way of dealing with a hard trend that you can't change. 10,000 boomers a day retiring opens up succession planning ideas. It gives you the notion of what can I be doing to plan in my workforce so that I don't get disrupted by the amount of knowledge that's walking out. What can I do to capture knowledge differently? Could be an opportunity around that hard trend. All right, next is government regulations. I mean, you can think about all kinds of stuff there, but the point is, when you start looking at all the regulations that we get hit with, anytime there's new ones or ones that have an impact, the question for you is, what could I do to anticipate that and actually prepare for it? So revenue recognition is out right now in our profession, and that would be one that you'd really want to know what the impact is. It could change your bank loan ratios. It could change your lending formulas. Wouldn't it be good to be able to go to the bank way ahead of time than after the fact when the audit comes in? And so I think that would be an area to get up to speed on and be proactive on. All the pending things in tax or healthcare, any of those, environment, what could you do in your organization to be anticipatory about those and then potentially beat your competition to complying with them or use them to your advantage? And then the last one, which is the one that we all know and love so much, is the technology hard trend. And we've already talked a little bit about that, but I want to point out a couple things about this exponential idea. So this is the perfect way of visualizing Moore's Law. I don't know if you're familiar with Moore's Law. Jeffrey Moore invented the chip at Intel, and he said that every year processing power will double and the price will go in half. And that's been going on for more than 50 years. So that's a pretty big deal if you take 50 to the power of 2. But here's a good way of visualizing just how big is that change. So some people say that your smartphone today is as powerful as all the rooms of computers that sent the first spaceship to the moon in the 60s. Here's 6 men loading a hard drive on a truck. That's a 5 megabyte hard drive in 1956. So fast forward, your smartphone, 25,000 times more powerful and storage than that truckload of hard drive.